All right, hey folks, welcome to another virtual wild encounter here at the Memphis Zoo. My name is Max and I'm here with my good friend Indy, the tailless whip scorpion. Now, before we start, I would like to address the recent news that you may have heard that non-primate mammals can contract the coronavirus. So here at the Memphis Zoo, we already follow CDC recommendations for how to safely be around other people as well as our primates. But in light of recent news, we are taking extra precautions for all of the mammals that call the Memphis Zoo home. Now, we also like to use this as a reminder to you for those with household pets. When you take them out for walks, make sure that you are maintaining a 6-foot distance at the least between any other animals and people to avoid spreading the virus around at all. And here in this current program, my co-host Kyle is about 10 feet away from me and wearing a mask. And the tailless whip scorpion that I brought today, Indy, is an invertebrate which we believe cannot contract the coronavirus, so I am going to be taking off my mask now. Whew, there we go. Now I know what you may be thinking, Max, you look so much more handsome with the mask on, but it's hard to talk with that thing on. Now for the main attraction. Today I have Indy, the tailless whip scorpion. There she is, kind of hanging out on little piece of bark. Oh, it's okay. She can get a little bit skittish sometimes, so we like to give her plenty of time to get used to her new surroundings, as well as to get used to us. Now, those of you Harry Potter fans out there may recognize the tailless whip scorpion from the 4th film, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. However, in the film, they said that this actually is a venomous invertebrate, and that is not the case. They also cannot make any sounds like they do in the movie as well. They are completely silent, and even though they may look a little intimidating to you, they're actually completely harmless to people. Now, tailless whip scorpions are not scorpions or spiders, but they are part of that group of invertebrates called arachnids. And that is because they do have 8 appendages, 6 legs they use for walking, and then they have 2 appendages in the front of their body that look kind of like long whips, and they use that to get around. Now, they can be found living in humid areas all over the world, in North America, South America, Africa, as well as Asia. And with there being over 130 different species of tailless whip scorpions, there's a good chance you may have some around you if you live in a warm, humid environment. Now, all tailless whip scorpions are nocturnal, which means they prefer to be awake at night, which is when they go out and hunt for food. And all tailless whip scorpions are carnivorous, which means they do like to eat meat or protein, and they prefer to eat smaller invertebrates or bugs that are easy for them to grind up and swallow in their tiny little mouth there. Now, as you can also tell, they are very, very fast, so they are ambush predators. When they want to catch something, they can use those whip-like appendages to sense where it may be, and then leap out and grab it with those spiky Petit Pups right there, which I'm going to switch over to this camera to see if we can get a better look at it. There you go. Nice job. So Indy here is a female, and the easiest way to tell, even though this isn't true for all tailless whip scorpion species, is by looking at those Petit Pups in front, the ones that look like they have thorns on there. If those Petit Pups are larger than her front legs, then it's probably going to be a male. If they are smaller, then it is most likely a female. But it's not always easy for us to tell. Now, we believe that Indy here is just a couple of years old, but we're not entirely sure because she actually was confiscated from someone trying to bring her into the country illegally as a pet. There you go. So we actually don't know initially where she comes from or how old she is. But they can usually live between 5 and 15 years, with the females usually living longer than the males. Now, as you can see, they can be a little bit skittish, but as I mentioned before, they're not dangerous at all to people, and even though they look very intimidating, they prefer to run and hide if they get scared. I think what's happening right now is I had her a little bit too close to my face, and when I'm speaking loudly and the air is coming out, that can be a little bit startling for her, so I'm going to hold her down here on the table and let her explore for a bit. as she's walking around and checking stuff out, we are happy to answer some of the questions that you may have. There you go, get a good look at her. As you can see, they also do have eyes. They have 8 eyes, but they don't really see all that well, and they rely on those whip appendages to feel what's going on around them. And if you look carefully, you may see her sticking them over and just kind of saying, what's going on? Now, part of the reason we like to have her out here on this bark is because it's where she feels more comfortable. They can be very sensitive to walking on new surfaces, and they do also have a great sense of memory. And being so fast, we don't want her to accidentally, say if she was on the table, run off of the table and fall, because she could end up hurting herself. They do have their skeleton on the outside of their body because they are part of the arthropod family, so they have an exoskeleton. But if she fell, that would still cause a lot of damage, which is why we like to keep her right here in the cork bark where she's nice and comfortable. All right, Kyle, do we have any questions coming in?
You got some new people joining in right now. They're curious what we're looking at today.
Yeah, so for those of you just joining us, welcome. My name is Max, and this is Indy, the tailless whip scorpion. She is not a scorpion or a spider, but a separate order of animals called Amblypygi. And that is because they do have 8 legs like other members of the arachnids, but not a spider or a scorpion. And they're oftentimes mistaken for another invertebrate called a vinegaroon or a whip scorpion. But the major difference is that whip scorpions have a little stinger on their back, and as you can see, she does not. And the name Amblypygi is actually derived from Greek for blunt backside.
We have Brentley, age 6 years old. He wants to know, where do they live? And Zoe, age 9, wants to know, how many years can they live for?
Hey Brentley, hey Zoe, thank you for the questions. So tailless whip scorpions, there's a lot of different species of them, and you can find them living in a lot of different countries where it's nice and hot and humid for them. So we do have some here in North America, as well as South America, Asia, and Africa. And they can usually live between 5 and 15 years, with the females living longer than the males generally.
Avery, age 6, are there other scorpions around?
Other scorpions, well, we do have scorpions here in Tennessee, but she is an arachnid like a scorpion, but she's not actually a scorpion. She is a tailless whip scorpion. We do have some emperor scorpions in our ambassador collection, but she is the only tailless whip scorpion that we have. And she lives by herself because that's how they usually prefer to live. They like to be solitary or on their own.
Zachary, age 6, wants to know, how fast do they run?
Ooh, I couldn't tell you how many miles per hour they can run, but they're very, very quick. Part of the reason they're so quick is they have to be able to get away from predators, because even though they have those Petit Pups with the little spikes on it on the front of their body, they're not venomous and they don't have a lot to defend themselves, so they have to be able to run away quickly. And they're also ambush predators, which means when they want to find something and eat it, they like to surprise it and grab it with those spiky arms.
10-year-old Owen wants to know, how big can they get?
Thanks for the question, Owen. So their bodies can usually get about 2 inches, and their leg diameter, so from one tip of their leg all the way to the other, they can get about over 20 inches sometimes. So the body's not too big, but they do get really long legs, which makes it easier for them to crawl around on vertical surfaces like this.
Lily wants to know, are they colorblind?
They can sense a little bit of color, but not in the way that people see it. And they actually rely more on using other senses, like almost like their antennae, to figure out what's happening around them. So being nocturnal animals, they just have to figure out what kind of movement is going around and what kind of predators or bugs are around, so they can figure out what to eat or what to run from. And the reason they're called a whip scorpion is because of these long, they look like whips, these long appendages that they use to feel around and figure out what's going on.
Kayla, age 10, wants to know, do they bite?
So they can bite, but not with their mouth. Their mouth is too small to actually be able to puncture, say, a human skin. If they got really scared and they want to defend themselves, it's probably hard to see in this camera, but those front appendages there are called Petit Pups, and they have um, little kind of barbs or hooks on there, and they can use that to grab onto something if they feel threatened. But if they did it to me, for example, it would feel like getting pricked by a rose thorn. But they tend to be very calm and relaxed around people, and if they get scared, they prefer to run than try and grab you with one of their Petit Pups.
Layla wants to know, are they poisonous?
Great question. They are not actually venomous or poisonous. So just a reminder for those of you, poison is actually something that is ingested, and venom is something that is injected. So spiders oftentimes can be venomous because they have to inject it through their fangs. Indy, the tailless whip scorpion, is not venomous in the slightest.
So Tatum and Owen both want to know, what do they eat?
So they love to eat smaller bugs, things that are easy to grind up into little pieces to make it easier to fit into their tiny mouth. So what happens is they will rush out and they'll grab onto something like, say, some worms or crickets or other small bugs. And they'll grab it with those Petit Pups and they'll tear it into little pieces and then feed it into their mouth.
So Caitlin and Ian want to know, what does the whip do, and has she ever had eggs?
Thanks for the question, Caitlin and Ian. So these whips here are used to figure out what's happening around her. She can use that to sense what's going on, feel for vibrations, or to touch the ground, making sure it's something that it's safe for her to walk on. And she has not had any eggs yet. I'm not sure that she will, but we will see. In the natural habitat, when they have eggs, they actually create a sac that they carry on the bottom of their body. And then when those eggs hatch, the tiny little babies will crawl onto their back, and they'll stay there for sometimes even a month until they molt and they can move around on their own.
Thatcher, age 8, wants to know, how do they sleep?
How do
when
they
they
sleep?
sleep?
Well, they like to sleep somewhere nice and dark and protected because it makes them feel a lot safer. And they prefer to sleep at a vertical angle like this. So just kind of hanging onto the wall here. So this is actually a piece of bark that she has in her larger house. And what happens is we'll put it in there and she'll sleep just like this. She'll get very still and just hang out for a couple of hours. And being nocturnal, she usually sleeps more during the day and is more active during the evening.
We're getting some new people to the group now. They just want to know, where are they found? Where do they live mostly?
So there's lots and lots of different species of tailless whip scorpions that can be found all over the world, usually in North America, South America, Asia, and Africa. They prefer really warm and humid places as well.
People are asking, was this the animal in the Harry Potter movies?
Yeah, so any of you Harry Potter fans out there may recognize the tailless whip scorpion from the 4th movie, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I think when they're using it in one of the classes, casting a spell on it. But unlike the whip scorpion in the movie, tailless whip scorpions actually are not venomous and don't make any sounds as well.
Zoe, age 9, wants to know, can you have one as a pet?
So there are some species of tailless whip scorpions that people have as pets. We'd like to remind folks, though, that before you get an animal as a pet, make sure to do your research and recognize that you are willing to put in the work to take care of them, because it can be a lot of work. We also want to remind people to make sure that you get pets from respected sources or well-known sources, because an issue with a lot of smaller animals, including invertebrates, is that people will take them illegally as pets and just grab them out of the wild. And that's actually how we got Indy. Someone tried to bring her into the United States from Mexico as a pet, and she was confiscated and didn't have anyone to take care of her, which is why she ended up here at the Memphis Zoo.
Gracie wants to know, where are their eyes?
So they have a pair of eyes in the front of their head as well as on the sides. So right up here in the front and then here on the sides. And they can see, but not very well.
Brentley wants to know, how old is it?
So we don't actually know how old she is because she wasn't born here. She was born elsewhere. But we believe she's roughly 2 years old now. Part of the way that you can tell is how often they molt. So a tailless whip scorpion, their body is covered in exoskeleton. And when they grow and get bigger, their exoskeleton does not stretch like our skin does. So instead they have to grow a whole new exoskeleton, and they shed off the old one, kind of like you're taking off a coat that was too small for you. And when they're really young, they do it every couple of months, and each time they do molt, they get bigger and bigger. But the older they get, they tend to molt a lot less as well. Usually maybe once a year or every 2 years.
11-year-old Madison wants to know, what is a predator to the tailless whip scorpion?
So honestly, there's a lot of different predators for them because there's a lot of animals larger for them, and because they're not venomous, they don't have a lot of ways of protecting themselves. So other reptiles like lizards may eat them, even some other invertebrates like spiders or katydids, even small mammals as well. The trick is catching them because tailless whip scorpions are very, very fast.
Celeste wants to know, will she eat spiders and worms?
So she probably would not eat a spider, maybe a worm. Her favorite food is actually crickets. So she likes to eat food that is really small enough for her to break up into little pieces so that she can eat it.
Got some new people to the group. They're wanting to know, is she poisonous?
Hey, so she is not poisonous or venomous, even though they do have the name scorpion. It is not actually accurate because they're not scorpions. They are their own order of animals called Amplitygii, but their common name is a tailless whip scorpion. And they don't use any venom instead to protect themselves. They are very, very fast, and they will run if they feel threatened at all. Right now, she is getting still used to being out here on the bark, which is why I'm trying to move very slowly so that she is nice and comfortable and she doesn't get surprised. Here, let's see if we can stick her right there in front of you. We'll switch over to this camera right over here. So you can get a better look at her. And she's reaching out with those long whip-like appendages, seeing what's going on. Nice. So, for those of you just joining us, this is Indy, the tailless whip scorpion. She's been here at the zoo for about 1.5 years now. And she originally came to us when she was confiscated at the Mexico border, when people were trying to bring her into the country illegally as an illegal pet. So we actually don't know where she came from originally or how old she is, but we do have a few different ways of being able to tell more accurately what that might be. Right now she's just exploring and checking things out with those whip-like appendages, which is why they're called a tailless whip scorpion. They don't actually use them as whips, but more just to feel what's going on around them. And as their name implies, they don't have any kind of tail or stinger on the back. And that's because they're oftentimes mistaken for another type of arachnid called a vinegaroon or a whip scorpion. The major difference is those invertebrates have a stinger on the back and much larger Petit Pups in the front than the tailless whip scorpion here.
Matthew, age 5, wants to know, how does she open her mouth to eat?
So she has little mouth parts right here in the front of her mouth. And she can't open them very wide, so she actually has to use these Petit Pups here, which is those, let's see if we can get a bit closer look. She has, some appendages right there in the front of her body that have little points or thorns on them, and she will reach out to grab her food and then bring it in, and she'll tear it into little pieces and then fit those little pieces into her tiny mouth. Let's see if you can get another better look of her right here. There you go.
Matt wants to know, are they UV reactive?
Ooh, that is a great question. So they can react to some UV sources of light. There's others that don't affect them as much, but not nearly as much as, say, other scorpions, other species of scorpions that can actually glow under specific lights or can't see, say, UV red light, for example.
Zoe, age 8, wants to know how many legs do they have?
So, since they are a member of the arachnid group, they do have 8 appendages, but they only use 6 legs to walk around. The other 2 legs they use as antennae to sense what's going on around them.
Sadie wants to know how do you tell if it's a boy or a girl?
That's a great question, Sadie. So, it depends on the species of tailless whip scorpion, but you can usually tell by looking at their arms there. So on the males, their arms are going to be a lot longer than their front legs. The rule of thumb is that the joint in their arm goes past the joint in their front legs, whereas females tend to have smaller petit pups, smaller than their front legs, and they don't reach out to those joints in the front legs right about here.
Jasmine wants to know, are they territorial?
So they can be territorial around other tailless whip scorpions, but it's usually the males that will spar with each other. But they do have different ways of letting other whip scorpions know that this is their space and they don't want anyone to come and bother them. But they generally do like to live by themselves in their natural habitat. They can actually communicate with these antennae sometimes by reaching out and moving in specific ways or even touching other whip scorpions, which is oftentimes what mothers will do with their babies to communicate.
Taylin, age 8, wants to know how do they smell?
How do they Taylor, that's a great question. I don't actually know how they smell. I don't want to get too close to her and sniff because that may scare her. But I don't know, how do you think they smell? I would like to imagine that they smell like flowers or popcorn, but I can't smell anything. Sorry, Taylor.
Got a lot of people hopping in saying, this is the insect from Harry Potter.
Those of you just joining us, welcome, welcome. This is indeed the insect, or excuse me, not insect, the arachnid from Harry Potter. This is a tailless whip scorpion, but a couple major differences between Indy, the tailless whip scorpion, and the one in the movie is that they don't actually make any sounds and they're not venomous at all.
Julie wants to know how long do they live?
So they can live up to the most 15 years. It's usually between 5 and 15 years, and it does depend on if they're male or female. The females tend to live longer than the males do.
Carter, age 9, wants to know, do they sting?
So they don't have a stinger, but if they felt really threatened and they couldn't get away, they can reach out with those long appendages or Petit Pups that have little spikes on the tips of it. They can use that to pinch whatever they feel like is going to harm them. If they were to do it to me, then it would feel like getting pricked by some thorns that you may find on a rose bush. But Indy has never done that because we make sure that she doesn't have any reason to. As long as she doesn't feel threatened and that we respect her space and her mood, then has no reason to get upset with us.
Alexandra wants to know, how long can their legs get?
So it depends a little bit on the species and how old they are, but I think the longest diameter, so from one tip of their leg all the way to the other, can be up to 20, sometimes even 22 inches, which is close to 2 feet.
Gracie, age 8, wants to know, what do they eat?
So they like to eat smaller bugs and other small insects as well. Indy here eats crickets here at the Memphis Zoo, but they'll eat little small invertebrates, and they're actually great to have around for pest control.
Kristen wants to know, are these around locally?
So you can find some here, maybe not in Memphis so much, but in Tennessee and neighboring states as well. Again, they like to be in really warm areas and really, really humid as well. And they're nocturnal, so it's probably going to be hard to spot them unless you're going out at night.
Laura Beth wants to know how many different tailless whip scorpions are there?
Ooh, that's a great question, Laura Beth, and I don't remember the exact number, but I know it's over 130 different species. They're continuing to discover more to this day, so that number probably has changed while I'm even talking right now.
Duncan wants to know, can they hurt you?
So if they felt really threatened, Duncan, then they can reach out with those tiny arms and grab onto your finger, but it couldn't actually do any major damage, and it would feel like getting pricked by, say, a rose thorn. But they're actually pretty calm around people, and if they do get scared or feel threatened, then they actually prefer to run away and hide.
What is their population?
Ooh, how many of them are out in the world? I don't know. That is a great question. Imagine it's not very easy to get a good count for them because they do live in so many different countries. And being nocturnal, you'd have to go look for them at night. And they like to hide under bark and different rocks, so you have to know where to look to find them as well. So great question, but a really hard thing to do, trying to count all of them.
Brentley wants to know, what ecosystem do they live in, and do they climb trees?
They do climb trees. They prefer to be up high where they're nice and safe and on a vertical surface like this, which is actually how they molt. But most different species live in tropical areas. Some do live in drier areas like the desert, but for the most part, different whip scorpions prefer tropical areas in different countries.
Felicia wants to know, why do they have such long legs and a long horizontal face?
So their long legs make it easier for them to move really quickly so that they can run in case there's a predator nearby. And in case you've noticed, they prefer to walk side to side like a crab does rather than forward and backwards. It makes it easier for them to climb and hang on to bumpy surfaces like this. And having those long legs means that you probably want to also have a small body that's not too heavy so that you can move quickly, making it easier to catch your food and to run away from different things. And even though they do have long legs, they don't have a lot of muscles. They're not very strong. So if they were too heavy, then they wouldn't be able to move very well.
Sadie, age 6, wants to know, when did they go to sleep?
So in their natural habitat, they tend to sleep during the day. All species of tailless whip scorpions are nocturnal out in their natural habitat. Here at the zoo, she tends to sleep at different times. It's not always easy to tell because, she doesn't snore or anything. Instead, they will just hang out in one spot and stay still for a long period of time. So I'd say probably several hours each day. And at night when we're all gone, I think she is the most active.
Max, age 6, would like to know, how did they build their home?
Ooh, that's a great question, Max. Also, a great name. Max to Max. They don't really build their own home. They like to find areas that they can hide underneath. So maybe some leaves on the ground or a rock, or maybe a little cavity or a hole in a tree. And they will go in there to sleep during the day so that they are nice and safe.
Sarah wants to know, can you have these as a household pet? And if so, are they difficult to take care of?
So they do have some species of tailless whip scorpion that you can have as a pet. But as I recommend when I get this question is that if you want one as a pet, make sure that you do the research first as to what it takes to take care of them and keep them nice and happy and healthy. Because you don't want to get an animal and then realize that you don't want to put in the work to take care of them. And then they end up sometimes being released or just set over to other people. So if you're going to get a tailless whip scorpion, do know that they can be a little bit skittish around people but are really calm and not dangerous at all. They really like humid environments, and make sure that you get it from someone that breeds these in human care. You don't want one that people have just taken out of the wild, because that means it has been illegally obtained.
All right, last question for today. Taylin, age 8, wants to know, do they live on the beach?
Do they live on the beach? Not so much on the beach, because I like a lot of different places to go and climb and hide underneath, and on the beach there's just a bunch of sand and water out there. So I don't think they're a big fan of the beach, but if you do see one out there, let me know. All right, folks, looks like we have reached the end of our encounter. It has been a pleasure having you all here with us. I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of the day. Stay safe, and we'll see you tomorrow at 12:30. Thanks, folks. Take care of yourselves.